Thank you for joining us for today's Magic in the Room. Before we start our episode, I want to ask for your help spreading the word about Magic in the Room. If you listen to the podcast and think it's helpful, would you please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen? Once you leave a review, take a screenshot and send it to info@purposeandperformancegroup.com, and we'll send you a free Magic in the Room hat. Reviews are one of the best ways for people to find us, so we're thankful for the help. Now enjoy today's episode.
Magic is found in every room where people connect over a shared purpose. In this weekly podcast, Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Welcome to Magic in the Room. I'm Luke Freeman.
And I'm Chris Province, and I'm excited. We've got a special guest today. Dr. Bob Schooley is back in studio. Welcome back, Bob.
Hey, it's great to be back. Good to see you guys.
Man, good to see you too. Always enjoy it. So today we are going to review some kind of key takeaways that you have, Bob, from the 2021 Gallup at Work Summit, which I know a lot of these takeaways, or the content that was used for the Gallup at Work Summit, was also based on the 2021 State of the Global Workplace survey that Gallup does. But just to kick us off, give us a rundown. What is Gallup? What do they do? What do they specialize in? Give us a rundown of that.
Yeah, I think Gallup, Chris, is going on about 50 years of being in the business of basically collecting a lot of data about human behavior. They are kind of considered a go-to source when it comes to kind of understanding things like employee experience, engagement, leadership effectiveness.
Gotcha. Said another way, we're going to spend some time closing the gap between what science knows and what businesses do. And I think there's a lot of texture to that conversation that we can get into today. But Bob, kind of as you view it and as you walk away from this information, what are you taking with you at the highest level?
Yeah, I'd like to share and kind of go through three key takeaways with you guys today. The first one, Gallup has done a lot of work around frontline leadership, so that supervisor, manager. And I would go as far as to say they even consider it kind of the ground zero when it comes to, or the epicenter, if you will, regarding culture and brand fulfillment. Mm-hmm. Their data suggests that 70% of an employee's experience is directly tied to their relationship with their supervisor or manager. And I want you to kind of let that settle in for a second. 70% of an employee's experience is tied to their supervisor or manager. I really think, when I read that, I've read the book that they've published. It's called It's the Manager. It really kind of jumped out at me as far as an employee's well-being, their engagement, their resilience. A lot of that is directly tied to how their manager treats them. That really kind of jumps out at me, and I think that's a very important thing to I'm kind of curious to hear your guys' thoughts, if you agree with that. 70% is a big number, and is it truly the epicenter for employee experience?
For me, I wholeheartely agree. I think 70%, if I was guessing, I would have guessed higher. Because, knowing the nature of organizations of, hey, get this person out of orientation, who do they go with? Whose team are they on? Their kind of localized agency is within their team. And that manager determines everything about it. And what is true today and will continue to be true, maybe even more so, is that like bad managers, even some good managers, good, well-intended managers, run off really great team members. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a function of organizations not elevating the value of that relationship. Like when we fully embrace that 70% of that employee experience hinges on who their supervisor or manager is. I think we are more intentional about culture. We're more intentional about the people that we put into those roles, and we're kind of deploying more resource than what we see being deployed today to cultivate the mindsets and behaviors of those supervisor managers.
Yeah, and I mean I believe the science, right? So read a little bit of the research that went into that 70% number. And what's amazing is that Gallup has all of this really well built out methodology for how they come up with that, and just the amount of lack of change that we see coming along with it, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I think about most people services departments and organizations, we can call it HR or whatever, the bulk of it is not in leadership development. And I'm kind of curious as to the why of that. And partly I think, an executive leader might see this 70% of the experience of any frontline employee is explained by the relationship with their supervisor or manager. And I just start thinking like, well, what am I going to do? Like switch out half of my supervisors that aren't performing, or train all of them? And then when I start thinking about what it takes for someone to be a good leader, if my old strategy has been, well, they were a good individual contributor, and so then they just need to learn a few like leadership skills, or, I give them a calendar that they can use to schedule things or whatever else. And I start thinking about, oh no, like real leadership training is expensive. It is, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of intentionality, and it takes expertise to be able to develop leaders. I get overwhelmed when I'm in that executive leadership role, putting myself in their shoes. I would get overwhelmed really quickly thinking about just the amount of change management if I was going to take that 70% number seriously and actually do something about it.
And you hear this idea of, executive leaders say, well, it shouldn't be this hard. Well, it comes down to like, how do you want the suffering? Do you want to, put a plan in place to level up your supervisor and manager performance, which probably takes place over 18 months, 2 years. You cycle people out, you identify the right candidates on the come up, or you keep doing things the way that you do them kind of after the effects of, COVID and the higher level of focus on emotional labor and connectivity and community in the workforce. And the simple fact is people aren't going back to work because nobody gives a shit about them there. Like if their manager wasn't connected to them, didn't care what their aspirations were, didn't steward their career goals, didn't do the things really required to develop them, why would they go back? So make your decision, stop bitching about not having people, or develop the people that lead the people within the organization.
Yeah, but it's hard. I mean, it's easy to say that, but it's really hard to do it. And I mean, I would say, well, let's do the hard work. Let's figure it out, but that's easy for me to say because I'm a leadership training guy, and I understand how to develop leaders and how you would build a program to do that. But for a lot of folks who maybe have been in engineering or in operations or in marketing or sales and now are at that C-suite level, it's really hard to say, well, how would I develop my leaders? There's not a clear answer in the same way that you can say, let's send a survey to see what benefits people feel like are most important to them, and then we'll address our benefits at open enrollment and give them some new, whatever little trinkets on their benefits plan that the survey said people wanted more. I mean, crazy example of that is one company we were working with, they had a conversation for 2 years on their holiday turkeys that every employee got. And like the meetings around this and the conversations around it, I was just went on and on and on. I'm like, what would Gallup's research say? What percent of that employee's experience and that employee's productivity is tied to getting a turkey versus the 70% that's explained by the relationship with their direct supervisor? But we see people like, okay, what's the easy technical fix to make people happy? Well, there isn't one. It's a hard fix to actually develop leaders.
Well, and I want to beg the question, maybe the question becomes, if I'm that leader, I say, what is our organizational character? And is our organizational character to issue technical fixes for as many problems as possible and ignore the character-based interventions and the character fixes required to make the work meaningful? Right? Very different existence. But that concept of organizational character is dependent on the executive leadership and them setting the tone for the firm.
Yeah. Well, I love this conversation. I think there's also something there about the quick, easy win and the hard, long win. And I think, Chris, too, in today's times, like you said, they really don't want to get tangled up or commit to something that's literally going to take 18 to 24 months to develop somebody, which is, it's kind of sad that we don't see that value in that investment. And I think, Luke, what you said about just trying to prioritize, the old focus on the blue chips, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, but who can afford to churn through a bunch of candidates? Like, what organizations can afford to do that?
There's only a handful, and I think we all know who they are. I mean, they literally they have the pick of the crop, and they've got the wallet to basically churn through thousands of leaders or managers, supervisors.
Yeah, so they're playing a numbers game.
Yeah,
and what I would call out about the Google, Amazon, Microsoft, name other companies that fall into that realm, is that those are all career accelerators. Yeah. So when you say like they have the pick of the crop, well, yes, because once I've worked at Amazon, I can work anywhere, or Google or Microsoft or other companies like that. The local privately held organization with 500 employees, guess what? You don't have the same flexibility. You don't have the same leeway. And if you're in a rural market, you run out of candidates, period. You get to a point where everyone's already worked there. You've cycled through them already. So I would kind of highlight that if you are not a career accelerating organization or not known to be that, and you're in a non-metro sort of location, like, it's even more important. Like, your development scaffold and your pipelining has even more pressure on it.
Good stuff, man. Luke, you look like you had something brilliant you're going to say.
He's always got something brilliant.
I don't know about that. But I will say, the work of developing leaders is work of developing values and character. And it's really, I feel compassion, I guess, for people who haven't kind of taken up that project yet, right? Especially if they've spent their career kind of just doing technical fixes
and being technically awesome.
Right. Being very good at what they do, to stare down this tunnel of like, no, my job, if I'm going to develop the best managers that really change what it means to be a frontline employee at this organization, is a 2-year in-depth cohort-based thing that is asking people about their personal values, and it's not just around technicals, and there's going to be reflection and this, that, or the other. Like, it would be incredibly intimidating if you didn't know how to do it. And so I do think the whole penny wise, pound foolish thing around, well, let's send out another survey about our benefits, or about, do you want to work hybrid or be at the office or whatever else, like, all super well intended, but it's missing the point, which is that there's human development work that is the highest ROI project that you could be working on?
Well, I feel very lucky because we've had a chance, the three of us, and to work with clients that do make that choice, and they do make that commitment and investment. And I don't know about you guys, but that's been some of the most enjoyable, fulfilling work that I've ever done. You know, just and you know what I find myself kind of like, hey, I need to take it up a notch, and because they're really working hard to accept this challenge, and it can be done, and the results are amazing.
Sure.
Well, I think this idea that everyone is just kind of full of potential, you just have to have the right setting for that potential to be realized, is totally true about leadership. Yes, people need to understand a coaching approach and things like that. But a lot of it is around just like having the space to have conversations that matter about what is good leadership and what isn't. And people develop, like they grow. It's like, you know, if you throw some seeds in the garden and then like it's going to be sunny and it's going to rain and they're going to sprout and grow, as long as you keep the weeds out of the way. That's a little bit kind of how leadership development is. You know, you need some sort of structure and framework, but a lot of it is just inviting people to think about things a little bit differently.
Yeah, and to that point, I'm going to try to make this a little bit linear, but thinking about the three kinds of labor. We have emotional labor, physical labor, and intellectual labor, right? Now, every organization, if you look across the work that they do, there's some percentage of the work that organization does that goes into each bucket. Now, if you are a service enterprise, you're going to have a lot of work in the emotional labor bucket. And this idea of developing managers that have an igniter mindset, that connect with people in a meaningful way, that understand their aspirations, will get into and assign risky work and support the people they're developing as they move through it, it becomes even more important for service-based organizations. If you truly rely on differentiated service, see Service Profit Chain episode or the resource on our website. If you rely on being service differentiated to have a successful business model, then it's even more important that you're developing supervisors and managers that can do this work. I want to tie this back to the Global Workplace Study, which says during COVID, women and young people were more negatively affected than middle-aged males. We'll say it like that. Okay? So the people that are responsible for serving in their families in historical roles, and the people that still require service and stewardship, were the ones most negatively affected by the situation of the last 18, 24 months. Now, what I find just dripping with irony is that it's now the fact that it's the middle-aged male executive that's saying, where is everyone? How come the millennials aren't coming back to work? Where are the females that were here previously? Like, they have good jobs. How come they don't want to come back? Well, they're in it to serve and be connected and be part of a community. And if the organization they're a part of is not providing that, there's no reason for them to be there. And that's what they're saying loud and clear.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about emotional labor. So you mentioned 3 different types of labor: emotional, physical, intellectual. So you're talking about the people who are responsible for doing the most emotional labor, right? And what is that? What's emotional labor?
I think if I were to define it, it's seeing past the transaction and making certain the person behind the transaction is cared for. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not about I've got this issue with your product. Like, okay, swap out the product. Now have a good day. Like, I need you to be satisfied and still connected and have an affinity for our business. And just swapping out the product doesn't accomplish that goal. The technical fix is you bring me something broken, I'll hand you something that works. But do you walk out of my business with the same affinity for us as a result? Or is it about me saying, I apologize, I can understand why that was frustrating, and I want to get you a functional product as soon as humanly possible. And not only do I want to make sure you have that, I need to confirm your sentiment about me and this product and our brand or our store. Like, I'm stewarding you. I want to understand, what other products of ours do you use? Are you on some sort of service agreement with us where I can take care of that next month? You know, is there something I can do to make sure that you are exceedingly happy and that you buy from us because when something goes wrong, you have someone you can count on? And that's what I mean by emotional labor. It's past the transaction, and it's stewarding the existence of the person that's doing business with us.
Yeah. So it's essentially the difference between how we feel ourselves to be at any moment and how we're acting.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There are some roles that are called to do high emotional labor, and it's essentially acting.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So retail is a great example. So I worked in this outdoor retail store in college, and I remember, you know, especially as an introvert, like everyone who walked in, hey, welcome to, so-and-so. And, oh, what are you looking for today? And how's it going? And like, that was emotional labor on my part, to show up in a way that was aligned with the brand and help folks feel seen, heard, understand what they were looking for, give them the right things. Now, that's much different than someone doing intellectual labor. Let's say someone writing code or someone working at a drafting table. They're solving a problem. It's labor, right? But that's more intellectual labor, and then physical labor. So I think what I hear you saying is that the folks who are responsible, just traditionally based on the roles that they're in, for doing the most emotional labor in our ecosystem, have kind of carried the culture through of organizations a little bit, been asked to do a lot. But if their managers are not refilling their buckets,
they're carrying the water for sure,
right? Then is that fair? And should you expect someone who is pouring out of themselves that emotional labor every day, but no one doing any emotional labor to refill them, should you expect them to be loyal? Should you expect them to be engaged? And so to come back to 70% of someone's experience, 70% of their engagement is based on the relationship with their manager. I think in roles that do a lot of emotional labor, like, well, yes, of course, is if no one's laboring for me, if no one's providing safety for me, if no one's providing security for me, if no one's providing a positivity in the workplace, but I'm expected to do that for everyone else, like, well, of course, I'm going to not want to be there.
Yeah. Makes total sense. And we have not, the thing about those three types of labor is, I think in today's space, there's very few companies that, like, there is the model where you can have a better mousetrap, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot more businesses that could be service differentiated. But we have not elevated our value of emotional labor, which is why we have the gender pay gap. It's why you have high turnover and low wage environments. I'll just say it like this. Gross generalization, we don't value emotional labor. And it shows up when 70% of the employee experience is hinging on that, and yet your organization can't hold talent. So how do you want your suffering? You want to scaffold development and invest in people in a meaningful way and really like find people of value, which I think is one of your takeaways, Bob. But it's like, can we be valuable people adding value to others? Well, that takes discipline. So just interesting concepts about how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, so that was the first takeaway. I think we kicked that one.
We did.
As far as we could. So what's the second takeaway?
I thought this was kind of fascinating. 82% of the time, companies fail to choose the candidate with the right talents to be an effective manager. Wow. That's a big number. 82% of the time.
So help us understand that number. What does that mean to select the candidate that doesn't have the best skills to be in a people leadership role?
Yeah, they basically, and Luke, you touched on this earlier. I think, and my personal experience tells me, a lot of companies, if an individual contributor is good at X, they think, well, hey, let's promote them and to the supervisor manager role, and they'll be good at that. The two different skill sets, and as you guys were just talking about with regards to emotional labor too, that's a big part, I think, of this swing and miss, if you will, when it comes to selecting the right people.
I mean, when you say that inability, if we go survey, Bob, I think if those 10 core competencies for effective leaders,
right?
We find that 80% have 4 or less of those competencies.
Yeah.
And it's scary, the number that just have 1. We're not set up to do that. And here we get into this conversation again. Like, are we willing to do the work so that we can select the people that can add value to others within the organization? And I think we get into all those character inventories, and you think about, whether it's 6 discoveries of high performance, or we unlock our emotional intelligence, or like we just connect with purpose in a new way. It's all this internalizing and inventory taking and character development that if you don't have the right person, guess what? They don't want to do it. And when you do have the right person, they eat it like Fruity Pebbles.
Mm-hmm.
They're all about it. The right people are all about it. The wrong people hate it. They buck it. That's why you shoot the hostage. Because you can easily spot this person is not the right person to be the future of this organization. This isn't the leader that's going to model the way. So we have to find the people that embrace that character work.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, if I was going to make that really practical for, let's say, an executive who's listening to this, the fear that I think you fear or that you feel as a senior leader around, oh, well, am I really going to make everyone go and do the touchy-feely stuff? Like, that fear is because the wrong people are leaders.
Yep.
And if the right people were leaders, they would eat it, right? They would love it. They would want more of it. They're hungry for it. Now, oftentimes they're busy, and that's the challenge. But the challenge is more around workload when we see it in healthy places, less so than, are you serious? You're going to make me sit down and read about what modeling the way is, or what it means to encourage and recognize people for value-aligned behavior? Like, really? I mean, the people that have that response, like, they shouldn't be in leadership roles anyway, or they need a ton of development.
Mm-hmm.
And the easier path is to select the people who have the mindset that wants to consume that content, wants to grow and develop themselves. If we select them, like, our life becomes a lot easier. And I think there are ways to do that, right? So you guys mentioned a little bit the competencies of leaders. What are some of those competencies that we see? Let's say if we did a screening assessment, talent assessment, or potential assessment with someone, what are the things that we're looking for?
Well, I look at every workplace as a community. So, Bob, I know something that we talk a lot is this idea of citizenry. And that's at the top of my list. Like, am I predisposed to be a good citizen to this team? And as we built out our assessment, I lovingly called it the "please don't tackle me" assessment. Right? Like, are you able to come on board this team and contribute? Contribute would be a great goal, but do not discount. Like, in no way can you discount from the direction that we're going or detract. And like, we can know this, right, Bob? We can know what type of citizen someone's going to be.
Yeah. And it's been fascinating too to kind of do a deep dive and kind of start identifying those core competencies. And I think Gallup, that's part of their process too. They've really kind of zeroed in on, hey, there are 8 to 10 core competencies that if someone's and it's kind of interesting, I believe that some of us are born with those. It's kind of how we're wired. But also there are many of us that have to work at those and be intentional and have models that we can follow and get that coaching that's so critical. But it is true. I think you can really zero in on kind of who's got that kind of core set of competencies that's going to lend to being an effective leader.
So, Bob, what else do you like other than citizenry? What's another variable that you like to lean on?
Wow, it's kind of interesting. We're bumping into. We've been using this with clients. We're using the Igniter mindset and the camaraderie, and I love that combination of somebody that's continuous learner, but then they also are that's coupled with a problem solver. And I love that. I love the fact that they any kind of issue that comes up in the workplace, they view that as, hey, this is an opportunity to learn and grow. And they share that with the people around them. So I love that combination of continuous learner, problem solver. We've even had a couple of folks that continuous learner, problem solver, and innovation. And I'm kind of
nice.
Like, wow, that's
triple threat.
Yeah, the trifecta.
Right.
Yeah. So, but what's really cool? I think though that you can start identifying these people, and I would really encourage people to start assessing everyone that joins your organization, and literally start kind of using that data to better understand. Hey, there are some people that literally walk through your front door that are amazing. When we talk about mindset, when we talk about camaraderie. They've got it. And just knowing that and being able to nurture and support that person through the process, I think can be huge. And I think that could increase the rate of number of people that we pick that are well suited for the type of leadership we'd like to see.
Yeah, and I'm not doing this as a plug. I'm talking about this because I believe that it is cutting edge science and that's one of our kind of tenets is to stay on the leading edge of where the research is headed. But can you just take a moment and speak to, okay, at Purpose and Performance Group, we have a camaraderie assessment. We have the Igniter mindset assessment. A lot of leaders, what they like to do is open it up for their team first. So a senior leadership team will take this, experience this, receive the results, go through coaching. Can you just walk through in application, what does that look like? So a person receives their assessment. What next?
Yeah.
What are we looking for?
Yeah. What we do with the Igniter mindset and the camaraderie assessment is we like to have kind of an overview workshop where we sit down and we share with people, why are we doing this? And the bottom line for us is we're doing this to help them leverage their strengths and enhance their leadership effectiveness. So our premise and our core belief is everyone in our organization brings strengths. They have value. And what I love about the assessments that we've done, we now can zero in on what are those core strengths. Is it continuous learning? Is it problem solving? Is it innovation? Whatever that might be. So we help, and it's crazy. I mean, the people that we sit down with, they are like, I've never been able to put words on what I feel like I'm good at. Mm-hmm. And now I better understand it. I can be more focused. So first of all, I would say we're very much strengths oriented. Mm-hmm. We want to it's really about making people self-aware of what comes natural, what they're strong at. But then there's also a number of items that fall in that what we call opportunity category. And what I love is we sit down one-on-one with folks and we say, okay, let's talk about make you aware of your strengths, figure out how you can lean into those. But then also, I think it's important to think about, all things considered, which of these 3 or 4 opportunities, as far as a competency is concerned, which one's going to give you the biggest return on investment? What do you need right now? What would be helpful? And I would say 9 times out of 10, there is always one of those opportunities where people say, man, if I could just get a little bit better in this one. And bingo, when we zero in on that, then we start helping them with resources, content, ideas, coaching. We start sharing and helping them get a little bit better in that competency. So I hear what you're saying. I don't want to sound like I'm selling it, because I think we're doing some really cool stuff. I think we're really helping some leaders get to the next level, both by becoming more self-aware of their strengths, but then also zeroing in on that high margin, high return on investment competency that's going to help them get over the next level.
Yeah. And I believe that, I want to call out as I kind of wrap this finding, and Luke, I want to give you the last word on this, but even that, once I understand what is kind of my default mindset, what is my orientation towards camaraderie, as I learn about that, that is a functional character development activity. Mm-hmm. And what we know, I do not know a single executive leader out there that says, I would like an organization full of leaders that are not persuasive. Most every executive I talk to says, I want our leaders to lead. I want them to be able to motivate and engage and inspire activity that's aligned with our brand. And what we know about persuasion is awesome, because it says your character as a leader and how you frame communications is what determines how persuasive you're going to be. So the richer we can, we cultivate our character in a way that is pointed, in a way that is rich, and we can draw people to our vision. So now as a supervisor or manager, as long as my vision is aligned with that of my senior leader, if I am clear about my character and my identity and what I believe, then I can be a persuasive leader for this organization. But if we do not go through the work of taking the inventories, doing assessments, and the soft work that's really hard, if we don't do that, it's really difficult for for managers and supervisors to drive things forward. Yeah. They can only transact.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I would say about the second takeaway, that 82% of the time companies fail to choose the candidate with the right talents, is that it really underscores how far off we are with our traditional HR, recruiting, people services constructs. I think that most recruiters would say they know what an effective manager is inside their organization with a lot of certainty and confidence. But for whatever reason, 82% of the time, either they're not right or the hiring manager gets involved and, ends up choosing someone that doesn't have the right talents. And so there's just a lot of improvement there. And I think whether it's an assessment or whether it's training for recruiters or for hiring managers, there are some fixes that I think would take that number down. And I mean, imagine the ROI, even if it went to 50% of the time instead of 82% of the time, automatically we have a whole bunch of folks that have a more supportive and helpful leader. That would be big. That'd be a huge change.
And I'm encouraged, this is kind of anecdotal, but I'm hearing that some companies are truly kind of carving out and creating what I would call an SME track. So you've got somebody that's that crazy good at that technical role. And there's a real temptation to say, well, let's bump you up so you can get paid more. But by the way, you've got this team that now reports to you. I'm hearing more and more examples, and I don't have a whole lot of data to support this, but I think organizations are starting to say, hey, listen, we can have a track in our company where someone that truly is a subject matter expert, they can thrive and grow and get paid like they should, just like their counterparts that are in the people management roles. I'm encouraged by that. I think that might be a little bit, it's a little bit, but every little bit helps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely happening. And as people do job pathing and all of that good stuff, like for sure, it's best practice. I would say what I've seen as folks have tried to implement that is that there is still mindset work around the change management to really believing that those SMEs are as important members of the team as people leaders. Gotcha. And so I do think, executive leaders have a huge role there to play in who they recognize, what people are getting recognized for, and then also, approving and developing, compensation plans and bonusing plans and all of that good stuff. I think it's going to probably take a generation for people to not equate advancement with people leadership.
Yeah.
Okay. Third takeaway.
This one's kind of crazy too. Only 30% of managers strongly agree that someone at work encourages their development. And kind of added to that, managers also report higher levels of stress and burnout and worse physical well-being than those they manage.
Wow.
It's tough. So we're here. We are, these guys and gals in this role. Really, it's hard right now. And now we're asking them, oh, by the way, we need you to up your game. We need you to take it to the next level. Thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I think key here is it says only 30% of managers strongly agree that someone at work encourages their development. It's saying the work's not being done. So there's a lot of blue ocean out there. And I think there's this fail of like really understanding what development is.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what we choose to do for a career, but this, like, if we don't see development as our job, if we play it safe and don't do the risky work, if we think development is going to a training course, if we'd rather pick talent than develop it, like, that's the problem. Mm-hmm. Rather than checking in with the people that report to me once a week, having that frequent development discussion, getting away from performance management, getting towards performance development, just operating a compelling team, a compelling organization, a place where people want to be. Like, I think we're missing the boat on what development really is, and maybe, just maybe, if we understand what it is, then we can show up that way.
Yeah. I mean, developing people is hard work. Like, think about the work required to come up with a stretch assignment and then check in on it periodically, or the work to move people around laterally to give them diverse experiences. I mean, none of this is free and easy. It all takes intentionality. Adopting a coaching approach. Like, there's a set of skills that you need to be a good coach, and you have to learn them. Now, it's not easy or free. And so, yeah, I mean, this one makes a ton of sense to me. I mean, even just, my experience and observations, right? It rings pretty true that only 30% of folks believe that someone is encouraging their development consistently. So how are we going to change that number for our organizations? If I'm an executive leader, how do I make that number 90 instead of 30? Like, it's a solvable problem. and there are ways to do it. So I think that's where the hope is for me, is that if I was going to try and change this number, like, yeah, brainstorm and come up with a list of some gaps that need to be closed and prioritize how we're going to do that. It's not incredibly difficult.
Yeah. And we always want to generate that fiscal ROI in a somewhat near term. So we're in the spot with the labor market, with people intending to leave, going exit bound, that you have to balance near-term cost against long-term sustainability. And now is the time to determine what game you're playing. Do you want to do some blend of that? Do you want to do something that's more transformational? Only that leader can really look at that organization and say, here's how sensitive we are to it. But I would just say 80% of our people practices from pre-COVID that were post-industrialist in nature, they will not provide sustainability to organizations going forward, and that's the reaction we're seeing from the market.
And I love our whole concept and our core belief of purpose and performance. And I'm a big believer and proponent in this, not necessarily because I want to make someone's life as a leader more enjoyable and fulfilling and engaging. I mean, that's great, but to be honest, I have learned over these last 30 years, if we don't help an organization move the needle when it comes to revenue and profitability, we're not going to be at the table. Mm-hmm. So, I can honestly say what my motivation in this is. Yes, I want to create healthy organizations so that all people flourish, but a part of that health is being profitable. Mm-hmm. and increasing revenue and being more successful in the marketplace. And I truly believe that what we're talking about today here is directly tied to that. I get it. It's an investment, but I've also seen and know that there is a very appropriate return on that investment.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's ever been more clear than it is now. Mm-hmm. Right? People are paying for a lot of deferred investment in the experience of their team members.
Yeah.
And I think folks are learning, like, oh yeah, maybe we should have done this 10 years ago whenever we first started talking about it. Because expectations are much higher. People have gotten a taste of what it means to be in a little bit more of a human focused atmosphere, and people are tired too. So how do we provide them some relief?
Absolutely.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah. I'll just say it's solvable. Mm-hmm. Not everyone has to be a leadership development expert, but they're out there. And a lot of these numbers, I'm just going to run through them one more time. 70% of an employee's experience and engagement is explained by the relationship with their direct supervisor. And 82% of the time, companies fail to choose the candidate with the right talents for a manager role. And only 30% of managers strongly agree that someone at work encourages their development. Like, those numbers can all be moved. Mm-hmm. And the first step is just figure out, what are your numbers, right? These are national average. So what is it for your organization? And running a survey and figuring that out, like, it's a great starting place. Mm-hmm. And just to chunk it down into one step at a time, like, what is the truth about our leadership pipeline and the experience of our leaders right now? And then we can make a plan.
Yeah, I'm just kind of carry that same theme. Solvable. How we pipeline talent, the intentional passages that we put in place to grow the talent of leaders or subject matter experts, keep them on appropriate track to continue to provide value to our organization, get the people that have that propensity to add super high value as leaders, get them out of individual contributor roles as soon as possible. And we accomplish that through assessment. So measuring things like camaraderie, like citizenry, like their growth mindset, their ability to be outward. Like, let's understand that before we onboard them, and let's reduce our number of surprises, because low-fit employees are ridiculously expensive. You want to know who's doing the social loafing in your organization? It's the low-fit employees. Do you know who's going to convert property within your organization? It's the low-fit employees. Do you want to know who gets hurt on the job? It's the low-fit employees. The cost of low-fit employees is ridiculously high, but they're already baked into your industrial business model. And that's the difference. We have to look at these returns differently and think about sustainability and what company we're going to be for the next 30 years, not where we've been the last 30 years.
Yeah, I love that. I love that it is solvable. There are a lot of really good examples out there. We've had a lot of success in helping clients do it. But boy, what really tugs at my heart is a lot of goodness that comes out of this. We talked about revenue, we talked about profitability, but then things like thriving. Organizations that are good at this kind of leadership development, their employees and organizations and all of their stakeholders tend to thrive. They have good lives. Their well-being is high. And I think there's just a lot of good spillover effect outside of the organization into the community, into families, just a lot of goodness that comes out of this.
You bet. I love that idea of this is really one way where even as an executive leader, when we're really intentional about how we do these things, we get to have generational impact on a family and direct influence on the well-being of a community. And that's why I love the work that we do, and most importantly, I love doing the work with you guys. So thank you all for being an inspiration to me and informing me along the way. If you want to get a hold of us, talk about any of the things we talked about today, whether it's finding better fit employees or how to scale the skills of your current managers and supervisors, you can reach out to us at purposeandperformancegroup.com or find any of us individually on any social network that you please. Just thank you all for listening today. Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Bob. Until next time.
Magic in the Room is hosted by Chris Province, Hannah Bratteroo and Luke Freeman, and produced by Ben West. Theme music is by Evan Grimm. Title track Fake Love available on Apple Music. And this podcast was recorded at Storycatcher Studio with video and audio editing and production support by Brad O'Hara and Alicia Crum, with inspiration, strategy and technical support by yours truly, Neil Hughes. Magic in the Room is a production of Purpose and Performance Group. You can find us at purposeandperformancegroup.com, and remember, previous episodes are available at magicintheroom.com.